Hello, I'm the Grug, and this is a talk on reflections on the cyber battlefield for the National Cyber Deception Symposium. So briefly, this is what we'll be going over. Just want to talk about what the cyber battle space actually is, then shaping it to your advantage, then shaping the behavior of attackers, and then sort of the mental health of hackers, things that you should be aware of. So very briefly, the cyber battle space is your network and systems, and that's basically, it's defined by your telemetry. If you know about it, you can monitor it, it's your responsibility, and you can do stuff. That's where you're going to be fighting. That's basically everything I have to say about the cyber battle space. But what I want to talk about next is what I call the noble truths, like just the fundamental truths about what happens in cyber. And the first one is that you're going to get hacked. Like, a hack happens. This is the base understanding that things get compromised, that stuff gets hacked. Now, this is not universally true for literally everyone. There are some exceptions, but that doesn't matter because statistically those exceptions are not you. So if we know that compromise happens, that people are going to get hacked, where do we go from there? And the place that we go is basically that you have to prepare. Right? Since you know you're going to get hacked, you have to be ready for that. And how do you do that? Well, first you defend to make sure that you are hacked as infrequently as possible. You want to raise the costs for the attackers so that the majority of attackers can't afford to hack you, and that's the first filter that you have. The next one is you want to deceive. So you want to have your network and things on the network set up so that when you are hacked, the attackers are in a environment that is working against them. So, things that they do will alert you to their presence. Things that they retrieve will be less useful than they appear, or might be actively malicious to them. Right, so you defend, you deceive, then you detect, because you have to figure out that they're there very, very quickly. Like, this is sort of your biggest priority. The sooner that you can detect them, the sooner you can dislodge them and get rid of them. And that's sort of where you want to be. You want to stop them coming in. People that come in, you want to control their experience and their environment so that it is malicious for them. Then you want to figure out that they're there rapidly, and you want to get rid of them. That's the goal of dealing with compromises. Basically control their entire experience. And so, sort of in short form, that's you want to make compromises cost more, yield less, harder to use, easier to find. You need to analyze them so that you can learn from mistakes that you've made in the past and mistakes that attackers have made that you can exploit in the future. And hopefully you can adopt and apply any lessons learned. And then you need to stay awake, because none of this works if detection sort of goes to an empty room. If there's a phone ringing and there's no one there to pick it up, did it really ring? So you need to be aware and monitoring and on the alert. Right, so that's sort of the basic understanding of cyber as a threat environment and what you can do about it. So let's move on to the how do you shape that environment to your benefit. So when we're talking about shaping the battle space, it's sort of implicit that this is to your advantage. You're trying to make the battle space to your benefit and against the attackers. And one of the things that's in your favor right here is the home field advantage, right? Like, they have to operate on your terms in your environment. The way to understand this is that they're effectively a new hire. They've showed up. There's no onboarding. There's no mentor. They can't email someone for assistance if they're confused. They have to figure everything out the hard way. And in doing that, they are constrained. They are constrained by what they can see, so they've got limits on their visibility, and they're constrained by their prior knowledge and the knowledge that they can acquire from where they are. So these limitations make it slower for them. If they're encountering something new and difficult, they're going to have to figure it out. And so the next thing is to sort of be aware that while offense has a huge advantage with positive feedback that things have succeeded or not, once they have compromised, they cease being purely offense and they become a combination, right? They have to defend their access. And now you can offend. You are able to do attacks against them because they're on the back foot. They're in your territory. They need to remain hidden. And if you can find a way to expose them and not reveal what that way is, you will have exploited them and they won't know why. So you have the advantage here on the attack, and they have the disadvantages of being on defense. So that's something to keep in mind, is that once they're inside, it's on your terms, and you can sort of leverage that in certain ways. One of them is what I've called the fourth dimension and the fifth domain. So fourth dimension is time, fifth domain is cyber. Essentially, the idea is that time makes it more likely that they will be discovered. So the longer they're on a network, the more likely that you will find out and be able to catch them. And there's a lot of sort of time issues that they need to be aware of. So there's dwell time, just sort of in general, how long they have access. There's time on target, where they have to do specific things. So if they're dumping a database, that's the time it takes to do that and exfiltrate is a particularly vulnerable period of time for them. And what I've done to model that is to use the Bill McRaven Spec Ops book, ideas of these sort of operations. So essentially what happens is you start out with a zero probability of mission success. You attempt to achieve relative superiority. So you are very likely at this point to achieve mission success, and from then on it's sort of it's almost in the bag. So his ideas for special operations with Spec Ops troops. If we look at that for cyber, sort of how it should appear to a hacker is that when they start out with like an RCE that gives them a God mode access, they already have relative superiority. Like they're already very, very well off in terms of their local access and control. Then if they install their toolkits and their malware and they're able to hide and sort of dig into the system, that gives them an incredibly high likelihood of success. That drops when they need to do exfiltration, because exfiltration is very anomalous if you're looking for it. They have to collect data, they have to put it in one place, and then they have to move it outside of the network. And that can be sort of a very, very high, like a high likelihood of being caught, because it's incredibly anomalous behavior. So sort of ideally what they would want to do is they want to get in, drop their malware, do their exfiltration, clean up, and then leave. And so in this case, their chance of failure is very, very limited. It's only during that narrow window of exfiltration. And then otherwise, they're barely there. But the reality is different, because the way that things work more typically is the access that they get is not very good. They have to then use local exploits or whatever to get better access. Then they install their malware, and then when they do their exfiltration, they don't do it just once. They have to do it multiple times. There's a frequency and a period where they're doing it. So every time they do this, while they do achieve mission success, they are exposed. And of course, over time, the longer that they stay there, the more likely they are to be caught. So just in general, their odds of staying secret are going down, and every time they run this exfiltration, their odds of being detected go up. So, this is more true of certain types of attackers. Obviously, with ransomware, there's usually only the one exfiltration, and then there's the installation and such. So it looks different. However, it's the same sort of thing. Like they are, at some points, they're, advantage hacker, and at other points, advantage administrator. So, it flips back and forth between blue team and red team. And if blue team isn't set up to take advantage of it, it's just like balls in red team's court, then balls in blue team's court, but blue team isn't there. Balls back in red team's court, and you have to be ready, you have to prepare, and you have to shape the experience before they show up. And I love the Murphy's Laws of War. So one of the laws is anything you do can get you killed, including doing nothing. And this is the problem for attackers, for red team. Anything they do can blow the operation, including doing nothing. So they've got this sort of constant anxiety to be aware of. So with that in mind, how do we go about shaping their behavior? How do we make it so that they act in ways that are beneficial to us and not to them? Well, to start out with, it's good to keep in mind this quote from Haroon. You don't lure hackers with vulnerable systems, you lure them with valuable systems. So what he's sort of dived to the point with straight away is that hackers have objectives, and if you place lures that appear to be things that they need to do to meet those objectives, they will go for those lures because that is what they have to do. Like, they're not just arbitrarily hacking things because they can. They're hacking things because they have a reason. So exploit that reason. And let's sort of look, like, with that in mind, knowing that there's things about hackers that can be taken advantage of. What are the characteristics of a hacker on a network? Well, one of them is that ignorance is strength. So when they show up, they don't really know anything. They're ignorant. That's actually a very strong position because they haven't done anything that can get them caught yet. And they are fairly safe. They're at that early part of our vulnerability graph, right? They've achieved relative superiority. They're very high up in terms of likelihood of staying secret. So they're in a good place. But in order to address their ignorance and to sort of gain knowledge, they have to take positive action, right? They have to scan, or they have to look around and find information. They have to do things in the system to reveal information about the system. And all of those actions are risky. They expose them to risk. So sort of the way to look at it is, in order to alleviate, in order to address their ignorance, they have to be vulnerable. And because of that, there's sort of these two vulnerabilities that show up. First of all is that they have to do something. They must take action on target. And that exposes them to detection. That's something that you can find. But the other thing is they have to trust the data that comes back. So they need to look around, and whatever they find has to be true because they don't have an alternative. And those are the two things that we're going to be looking at. Like, how can we abuse that? How can we take advantage of their vulnerability? So, as I said, the base vulnerability that they start from is that they are a new hire and they don't have onboarding. So they're just sort of like these entry-level people with no idea what's going on. They're sort of clueless. And that's going to sort of lead to things that are inherently very vulnerable, such as blundering around the network. They're just going to screw up as they go around. They're not going to know about things that are there. The next thing is they're going to need time to learn the pattern of life, both of the network itself, so sort of what is normal traffic, what's normally happening, but also of the organization. You know, do people work on weekends? Is it sort of 9 to 5 or around the clock? Are there remote people from everywhere in the world, or, you know, only from a small number of places? There's just a lot of information that they have to learn and take in, and that's going to take time, and time is not their friend. The other thing is that in gaining access and in trying to achieve their objectives, they don't actually know what the valuable systems are that they need to steal from, right? So the first one is obvious. They don't know exactly where they are. They need to find them. And the second one is slightly less obvious, which is that they're not entirely sure what is valuable for each particular target. So, for example, if you hit an accounting firm, what is valuable is going to be different than if you hit like Colonial Pipeline. You know, it turns out that what's valuable for them is their one billing system that controls all the gasoline for the entire East Coast. That is a valuable system. Whereas, you know, somewhere else it would be a different system. Maybe just the customer database would be valuable. So the thing is, they have to find out what the true crown jewels are. Ransomware people, obviously, they hit everything and just hope that they get lucky. So there's that. But the ransomware people do actually have to explore the network and find things to exfiltrate that are valuable and interesting so that they can extort that way. So it's not like not all is lost. They still have these same vulnerabilities, just not in the same way that, you know, like the SVR or GRU or NSA would have. So they've got these vulnerabilities that they have to take actions and they have to sort of do specific things. But they also have susceptibilities. So they tend to be very greedy. And this is because it's a lot easier to collect something and then minimize it afterwards than it is to minimize it before you collect it and hope that you didn't miss anything that you need. So, for example, they get everything that they can. They also have, like, they find credentials incredibly shiny. So if there are credentials, they have to take them. There's sort of no way that they can go like, oh, that's probably just a fake. That doesn't happen. They're sort of compelled to take them. They're also, not necessarily always, but, you know, like if they find servers that appear to be useful to dig into and to just sort of use as their base, that's something that's attractive to them. You know, you'll find others. There's ways that they behave on a network that will be unique to that organization or to hackers in general, and you can start sort of placing things that you want them to find. So sort of it gets to this idea of that, like, if you know what they're looking for, you can leave them something to find. And the thing about people is we stop looking after we've found the thing that we are looking for. This has been used to take advantage of getting through customs, for example. So I had a friend, and the way that he used to smuggle small amounts of weed between Canada and the US was that he would purchase a bottle of liquor and a case of beer. And sort of the rule was going across the border, you were allowed one duty-free alcohol item, either a bottle of liquor or a case of beer. So he would hide the weed, sort of poke it through one of the holes in the case of beer so it would be out of sight and not visible. Then he would take it through, and the customs guys would notice that he had, 2 items when he's only allowed 1, and they'd say, hey, you're going to have to pay tax on 1 of those. And he'd be all like, oh, I'm sorry, I thought I got 2, I didn't realize. All right, well, here's the receipt, so blah, blah, blah. And then, pay tax. And they would be happy because they have, enforced the law and they've done their thing. And he would be happy because he'd get weed across the border. And in the process, like by giving them something to find, they can stop looking. This was used by a guy who actually did a huge amount of grave robbing, like he stole antiquities and stuff and smuggled them back to the US. One of the techniques he would use is he'd put like all of the good stuff in his checked luggage, and then he'd put like one big obvious item in his carry-on which would be detected, and so he could get stopped for that, and they would impound it or he would leave it behind, and he'd be all apologetic, like, sorry, I didn't realize I couldn't take that. And they would have done their thing. They'd found what they were looking for and they could stop looking. Now, I don't recommend smuggling using those techniques, but just as an example, that's a thing to be aware of. So your goal as the blue team or the controller of this environment is to realize that these things, these vulnerabilities and susceptibilities, expose hackers to risk. And then you need to bring praxis to that theory of risk. So you need to make them actually experience negative consequences for this. So, you must take your opponent into a deep, dark forest where 2 + 2 = 5, and the path leading out is only wide enough for 1, from a chess grandmaster. So, as we were saying, it's just like, you need to control the environment and control their experience. And when you know what they're vulnerable to and what they're susceptible to, you have levers that you can use to adjust their behavior. And, that's what you want to be doing. Switching gears, let's talk about a cyber operation that was meant to change behavior. So this is the cybercom operation against REVIL that happened earlier in 2021, sort of just in October or so. So basically in June, REVIL figured out that they were hacked and they went dark. They shut down, they stole all the money that they hadn't given out yet, and they went quiet, they retired all their stuff. Then in September or so, one of the admins, or a few of the admins, got together and decided that they wanted to make more money, that they sort of weren't happy with how things were going. They didn't like being retired. So they reformed and they relaunched the old site. And they used the same Onion Services key pair that they'd used originally when they were hacked. And this sort of demonstrates a very serious problem with their intelligence collection capabilities, because the US media published a lot of information about how they were hacked and what happened. And this is because the FBI and Cybercom like to brag about things. So they were putting out, a lot of information about how this had happened. And even so, REVIL still used this compromised key material. So Cybercom did this incredibly elite, super advanced, brilliant denial of service attack where they stood up an Onion service using the same key pair, which effectively meant that there was like a null route, that it wasn't possible to get from, it wasn't possible to get to REVIL services. So that was Cybercom changing, doing a cyber effects operation to alter the behavior of the REVIL admins. So when this happened, they suddenly discovered that they're hacked again. One of the new head admin guy goes out, he looks at his stuff, he realizes he's been compromised, he freaks out, and he shuts down. So this operation was apparently sort of not particularly advanced, but the effect was to make the admin believe that he was personally under surveillance by the US. and that was sufficient to scare him. So, yeah, Cybercom has been flexing this hard. They are really, really excited about their attacks against ransomware groups and everything that they've done, which is apparently not very much, since we haven't heard about it. So this has sort of been their poster child, their big event, and it's not as impressive as they seem to think. Like it's not actually as cool as they think they look. And that's because if we think about it, like, is this operation repeatable? Is it a good idea to be doing this sort of operation? Is this specifically what is going to deal with ransomware? And to address that, let's think about what is ransomware, and how would we impact ransomware as an issue. So first of all, like, ransomware is a job. This is not a hobby. These people are paid. They are motivated to keep making money because they make a lot of money. So this is the thing that they do, and they have a reason for it. The financially motivated is used as a dismissive term, but these guys are getting $1 million paydays every few months as, Joe Schmo nobodies, not even high up in these groups. Like, ransomware is a multiple $1 billion a year business. Like, there's a lot of money, and these guys are motivated. Money is actually a really good motivator for getting things done. Like, you'd be surprised how successful it can be. So the ransomware gangs, specifically, the way that they operate is sort of as a cooperative business, that the people involved are involved in quite a lot of the business itself. Like, they're not employees that get hired on. They are members. They're sort of affiliates in the terms used in ransomware. But you've got this core team that they manage the services that get used, like the infrastructure, the extortion, the encryptors and decryptors. They manage the negotiations. They manage the brand to make sure that the brand is respectable so that they can get paid. They provide, basic services to these guys, and they take a percentage of the take. They will have their own financial people to do money laundering and whatever, have HR people to do hiring, etc. And then the people that actually do the hacking, that sort of monetize it and make all the money, these are the affiliates, and they are not tied to a particular group. So the admins are sort of tied to that group. That's their thing. But the people doing the work are not. And so what you see is that these core teams will actually compete to get affiliates, because the amount of money that you make is a percentage of your successful affiliates. So the more affiliates you have, the more money you make. So there are, they will offer better terms. There will be, they'll go about, like, we have more support. We have better systems that you can use. We've got better things that are available. We'll give you a higher percentage for your share, and so on. That's the ecosystem. That's the environment that ransomware is operating in. And if you do attacks that reduce the number of core teams, the remaining core teams will have better bargaining power against the affiliates. Like, the affiliates will have fewer options, fewer places to go. And so the core teams can be less responsive to them, sort of take a larger cut, and so on. Particularly if they say, oh, it's very dangerous for us right now, so we have a surcharge for our hazard pay, and increase the amount that they take. So it's, like, this is the environment that it's in. You have to be aware that the ransomware groups that you see are just sort of like, they are small shells, and the actual work that's getting done is done by these independent contractors. So with that in mind, if we look back at an attack that interfered with the infrastructure of a core group, is that a thing that is going to interfere with ransomware? Is this a blueprint for how to deal with ransomware? Well, it's probably not repeatable and reliable for a number of reasons. First of all, it doesn't impact the affiliates at all, and the affiliates are the ones that are actually doing the damage. So unless you can impact them, you are not going to get any results in reducing the amount of ransomware that's going on, right? Like, those are your target. That's who you need to address. That's who you need to influence. The other thing is that humans can basically get used to anything, right? So we had two people, two admins of REVIL who have detected that they're under surveillance and they freaked out. Now, what happens when we get to 5 or 10 or 20? Unless there are actual repercussions from the surveillance, it's going to stop being scary and just be part of doing business. It's just going to be, oh, okay, well, I guess we got hacked and I'm under surveillance. You know, I buy drinks for everyone this week. You know, I won. It's not going to be scary if nothing happens. It's just going to be a thing. It's just part of the environment that they get used to. So with that in mind, is this a good use of state cyber resources? Like, you've got your cyber capabilities and you want to use them for important things. Is making a few ransomware operators feel special one of those things to put your cyber resources into? Now, if you're Russia, absolutely. That's what you want your opposition to be spending their cyber resources on, because you can then monitor the infrastructure that's being used and detect those ODE and those techniques and the software that's being used. So you can learn a lot about your adversaries on when they're attacking these ransomware groups. And as Russia, you do not care about these ransomware groups. These are not a national resource that is very, very important to you. So you would happily allow them to take all of the fire. And I think that that is not a good use of cyber resources, but maybe that's just me. So I think this is a discussion that needs to happen, is how do you actually interfere with ransomware, particularly going after the affiliates, and how do you do that without burning precious resources that you could use elsewhere? Okay, so switching gears again, let's talk about mental health for hackers. Sort of the psychology of an operator and the things that you can do to manipulate and make their lives more difficult. What are the levers that you can go after? So one of the things is that hacking is actually very stressful. The amount of stress obviously differs depending on, say, if you're at a state cyber institution or a state, like if you're at NSA or SVR or GCHQ, you are not worried about being arrested. You don't have the same fear of authority. You've got a belief in mission. You are committed to your thing. You believe you're the best, etc., etc. You're not worried about certain repercussions, but even so, you're still worried when you are conducting an operation, because is the exploit going to work, or is this the one architecture that we didn't port it to? Is this action I'm about to take the thing that's going to get us tripped up? Like, did I mistype something? Did I forget that, we're going to time out because the stack that we're using is too tweaked and the link that we have is over a satellite, so the latency is too high? There's just things that can go wrong. And so you end up with this anxiety and paranoia, even though it might be significantly less for a state organization than it is for someone who's acting illegally. It's still there. And that's in a lot of ways because there's this sort of uncertainty. There can be uncertainty about, things working, or did you accidentally trigger something? Did you leave traces that you forgot about, etc.? And uncertainty just, it makes you anxious. That's what being human is. So if we, we could say like the point of having an intelligence operation or intelligence service is to reduce uncertainty. To to do that, you basically, you collect data, you analyze the data, and then from that you can produce the intelligence. And that's done through, the OODA loop drink, or we call it sense making or whatever. But you have to go out, get data, you have to understand the data, and then from that you can figure out what's going on. That's the basis. And then once you figure that out, you can do something to fix it. So you need, in order to deal with these problems, you need to reduce the uncertainty about what's going on or what happened. And then from that, you can address it. You will know, okay, I don't need to worry, or, oh, in future we need to do this, or, okay, we need to like tear down the infrastructure and start over. All of these things. So what is sort of the worst thing that can happen in terms of anxiety and uncertainty is when an operation goes bad, like you lose access or your implants disappear, or something indicates that a functioning op is just no longer accessible. It stopped working. So that's a bad experience. What makes that even more stressful is when you don't know why, right? So what you want to do is, oh, okay, our operation blew up. Well, what happened? What was the last thing we did? Was the last event, like, was the terminal action our thing? Like, did we run an old version of the implant that made the box reboot? Did we leave something in the logs that didn't get cleaned out? Was there a thing that I did that, looking at my actions, I can figure out, and then in future never do that again? Like, can I correct that? And you hope that you have sufficient information to do this, but most of the time you don't, because you do not know what triggered the shutdown from the other end. You don't know what alerted them. You don't know, did you lose access because they just did a system upgrade? Did you lose access because they moved locations and they turned the servers you were using off? Did they have a power outage and will you get access back in a few days? Did they do an upgrade and your thing no longer works? Unless you gain access again or someone tells you, you don't know what actually happened. And so, as Blue Team, how you can take advantage of this is you want to deny access to data. So you want to limit the amount of information that the Red Team has about what went wrong. The idea being that, if you don't know what's broken, you can't fix it. And that's where you want to leave them, with the knowledge that something that they do is wrong. They've got a fatal flaw, they have a serious problem somewhere, but they don't know what it is. Is it, a tool? Is it a way that they operate? Is it just bad luck? What is it that they have that causes problems? And so, right, so like one of the knock-ons from that is that sometimes, you get these cycles of like, okay, well, if it wasn't bad luck, if we got detected, what did they learn? Did they get access to everything or only some stuff? How much did they find? And from that, what were they able to piece together? Did they know more about us? Did they know about our operations, or do they know about me? If you're doing illegal stuff, there's a lot more concern about personal, being exposed personally than if you're at a state institution, of course. However, all of these anxieties sort of come up when things go bad, like what went wrong, what do I need to change? And if you don't know, it sort of nags and gnaws at you. So that's sort of the takeaway I want to leave you with, that your role is to create uncertainty, to take advantage of this sort of hacker psychology, that they are going to be nervous about things that they don't know about. So you want to take advantage of that. And the other thing, of course, is you want to make a network where hackers fear to tread. So you want to exploit those vulnerabilities and those susceptibilities that we were talking about earlier. You want to make it so that when they take actions on target, they are doing it in a way that benefits you because you have controlled their experience. So that's sort of the takeaways that I wanted to give you. Craft your network to make it hostile to hackers, and to make them not trust their senses, and to make them, when they do sense making, to achieve the wrong results, to make the wrong conclusions and then take actions that you want them to take, and to make them uncertain, to not let them know what they did wrong, to interfere with their stuff, just make them anxious and stress them out. So that's it. Thank you.